There's one mistake that I see wedding planners making all the time, and it doesn't matter if you're brand new to the industry or you've had your wedding planning business for a while. And this was a mistake that I made many times in my planning business until I recognized that I needed to make a change. So if you're feeling overwhelmed by the amount of work you're doing, if you feel like it's hard to get through your workday and you can never get through the mountain of to-dos and client requests, if you are having a hard time juggling all the different areas of planning with your clients and also your business, then you're probably making this mistake. And in today's video, I'm going to reveal what that mistake is, and I'm going to teach you how to fix it. Hey there, friend. Welcome back. I'm Candice, your business BFF. If you are a wedding planner, do me a favor. Make sure you're subscribed to my channel. I release YouTube videos all about wedding planning and growing your wedding planning business. I'm a former wedding planner and designer turned business coach for wedding planners. In 2019, I sold my very successful wedding planning business after 12 amazing years so that I could teach you everything I know about how to scale and grow a wedding planning business. And today we're talking about the biggest, and I mean the biggest mistake that I see wedding planners making pretty much all the time. And I have to tell you, it doesn't matter if you're brand new to the industry or if you've been in the industry for a while. This mistake, does not discriminate based on the level of experience you have or what you think you know or what you don't know. And I've watched this mistake tear down more wedding planning businesses than I would like to count. And the mistake that I see most wedding planners making that we're going to be talking about today, and what I'm going to help you try and fix, is saying yes to things you were not hired to do, aka scope creep. Scope creep can lead to stress. It leads to missed deadlines, unhappy clients. You would think the opposite, but it actually makes your clients unhappy. And as a former wedding planner myself, I really understand how easy it is to say yes to the requests of your clients, to try to please them, to be supportive, and most of the time just to help them out because you care. But saying yes to things you were not contracted to do is essentially what scope creep is, and it is going to negatively impact your wedding planning business and also the relationship that you care so much about with your clients. Now, here is a little bit more about scope creep. Maybe you've never heard of this term before, so you're watching this video and you're like, news to me. I feel all the stress and the anxiety, and my clients are kind of not always happy with the work I'm doing, but I didn't recognize that the problem could actually be scope creep. Now, scope creep is essentially saying yes to things you were not contracted or hired to do. And it's interesting because scope creep, it's not just one specific task you do for a client that you weren't hired to do. I think it's like a death by 1,000 paper cuts. It is a series of very small yeses that compound over time. And then suddenly you're doing lots of work that you never agreed to or factored in when you said yes to booking this client and when they signed their contract. And scope creep with just one client, it's not going to make a huge deal in your business and in your time and in your to-do list and in how stressed out you might be. But scope creep with every client, 20 clients, makes a huge impact, not only on the relationships you have with your clients and your everyday workload, but also your mental health, your stress levels, and the love that you have for this job. I've seen scope creep affect more wedding planning businesses than I'd like to count, which I've already mentioned. And I've actually seen it close wedding planning businesses because the level of stress and the level of burnout just took out that wedding planner and they didn't want to do the job anymore. And I don't want that to happen to you. So today we are going to talk about 5 ways that you can eliminate or reduce scope creep in your business so you can stop feeling so overwhelmed and so stressed, and also so you can continue to provide an amazing experience for your clients. The impact of continuing to say yes to things that you were not hired to do is actually pretty great. And I want to just put this in focus for you before I share my 5 quick tips. And by impact, I mean this is what you can expect to happen should you continue to people please and say yes to things that you weren't hired to do. Number one, you can continue to feel very stressed out, overwhelmed by the amount of work that you're saying yes to or that's on your plate, and also that work affecting negatively the other work that you need to be doing in your business. It's going to become increasingly hard for you to be productive and to manage your time. And from there, what you're going to find is that your clients are going to become increasingly upset with you and not happy with the work that you're doing. And this is the interesting thing about scope creep and about saying yes to too many things. You think you're trying to help and you think you're trying to do your very best by saying, yes, no problem, I can do that for you. But in actuality, you are spreading yourself way too thin and you're committing to things that you haven't thought through properly to understand if it's within the scope of work you've been hired to do, if you have time to do it, if you're capable of doing it, and if you are actually the person who should be doing it for the client. What ends up happening is your clients get upset and they feel like you're not doing your job, and you may take a long time to get back to them. You may miss deadlines, and that just leads to upset clients. So a scope creep could actually negatively be impacting your client relationships. And I don't want that for you, because as a planner, the relationship that you build with your client is so incredibly important, and we need to keep those relationships positive. Let me know if you'd like a video on how to keep relationships with your clients positive, and if you'd like me to just talk about building relationships with your clients in general to keep things happy and upbeat. And even if there are some scenarios that you would like me to talk about here on YouTube, comment below this video. Maybe there's something you experienced in a wedding recently and you'd like my hot take on it. We can do a sort of an office hours here on YouTube. So feel free to comment below. All right, so those are some of the reasons why you're gonna wanna nip scope creep in the butt right now. Is it bud or butt? You wanna nip it in the bud or you wanna nip it in the butt? Sorry, pause. What is it? I don't know. I think it's both. It's for the sake of this video, it is both. So let's talk about 5 ways that you can eliminate or reduce scope creep in your wedding planning business. The first is setting clear expectations and boundaries with your clients. This is hard to do, especially if you've been made available 24/7 to your customers and you've really been bending at every request they might have to do something or to look into something or to call someone or to research something, but you really need to start setting some very clear expectations and boundaries with your customers. Boundaries and setting expectations for what they can expect from you. And next is actually caring for your clients. I know sometimes boundaries and saying no feels like you're doing people a disservice or that you are doing something wrong. But in truth, maintaining and upholding boundaries helps your client to understand what you're in charge of and what you're not, and how they can connect and communicate with you. It's also going to make sure that you don't overwhelm or burn yourself out. Now, when we talk about setting expectations, this is very important. And with the wedding planners that I mentor in the Planner's Playbook and also in my mastermind, Wedding Pro Insiders, expectations is something we talk about a lot. I truly believe that most client issues can be managed by setting clear expectations and communicating what they can expect next from you. So if you want to eliminate or reduce scope creep in your wedding planning business, you need to start telling your clients what happens next and setting their expectations for the amount of time that thing takes and what that process looks like with clear communication, clear and concise communication. You can do this in your planning meetings with your clients. Of course, you can do this in the planning software where you might be communicating with them in, and you can also do this via email. So as you're emailing your clients and you're setting the tone or you're answering questions or you're giving them updates, always remember to set their expectations for what you're doing and what happens next. And if there's things that they're requesting outside of the work that you're doing, set boundaries and also expectations for how you can support them, but how that support might come at an additional cost. Let me just remind you of that. How you can support them and how that support can come at an additional cost. That's one of the hardest things to do as a planner is to say to your client, I appreciate that you would like me to support you in that, but that's outside the scope of our work. And in order to do that for you, it's going to cost you more money. We'll talk about how to do that a little bit later in this video. Next, I want you to really focus on communicating effectively with clients. I've said the word communication many times so far in this video, and that's again because I truly believe that with proper communication, most client issues can be resolved or never even surface to become an issue. And as a wedding planner, your job pretty much is 100% communication. So if you have clients who are asking you to do things outside your scope of work, or if they're getting upset with you for not doing things quick enough, fast enough, or not being a step ahead of them, you need to look at how you are communicating with your customers and make sure that you are communicating the right information up front. This is just a side note, but if you feel like your clients are constantly jumping ahead, that means that you are not communicating what they should be focused on well enough, and you're not setting those expectations. I also think it's important to make sure that you're listening, because a good communicator is really a good listener. They listen to what people are asking, to what their clients are saying to them, and even listening for cues below the surface of what your client is not saying. It's important for you to listen to your client's feedback, to listen to what they want from you, and as the expert, because that's what you are, guide them on what they should be doing next and what your role is in whatever that is, whatever the next steps are. The next step to eliminating scope creep is to make sure you have a very detailed contract. So we've talked about expectations, we've talked about setting boundaries and making sure you have clear communication. All of that should actually live inside a contract. If you don't have a wedding planning contract, comment below. I'd be more than happy to send you some suggestions of where you can purchase one. I personally love Legally Set, and it's what I suggest for all of the members inside my community, the Planner's Playbook. P.S. If you're a member of the Planner's Playbook, you actually get 20% off all of their contracts. So another reason to become a member of our community. And I've linked to the Planner's Playbook below in case you'd like to check out my community for planners. But regardless of that, a detailed contract that outlines the scope of work to be performed by you is what you can fall back on when your client's asking you to do things that they haven't contracted you to do. You need to make sure that your contract has a detailed list of services of what is included. And make sure that it's not ambiguous in any way. This is why I do not love things like unlimited email communication, unlimited meetings, or unlimited phone calls. Unlimited is unattainable, and unlimited means we can just keep adding and adding and adding things to your plate, which essentially is what scope creep is. So in your contract and in your contracted services, make sure you're very clear about how much communication you will give them, what exactly you will be working on, what vendors you are in charge of, and what vendors you will be securing. If you're designing for your client or offering any styling, any creative, what that scope of work looks like. And think of it like this. I know it can feel heavy, and when we talk about contracts and legal, it can almost feel like we're bullying someone, or it can feel aggressive, but it's protection. It's protection for you, the business, but a contract is a two-way street. It's also protection for your couple. And if you have a detailed contract that outlines explicitly what you are in charge of, there should be very little question when something's outside the scope of work that you've been contracted to do. There should be very little question. So a detailed contract is a must. The next way for you to reduce or eliminate scope creep is to stop being afraid to say no. I feel like we need to have a little talk. Are you ready? Come in close. Come in close. I say this to you with love. You need to stop saying yes to every request that your client has. It's okay to say no. It's okay especially to say no to requests to do certain things that are outside the scope of your work, and to gently guide your client on how you can support them with that if it's something that you would like to do or feel like it's it's part of a wedding planner's role, just not what you've been contracted to do for this event. I want you to know something, and it's your clients are entitled to ask. They're just not entitled to get what they ask for. Your clients are entitled to ask you to pick up the phone and call someone, or to research something, or to redo a design, to start from scratch, to change their wedding date and start planning from absolute square one. They're entitled to ask you to do all those things. But just because they ask you to do it doesn't mean they're entitled to receive a yes, or they're entitled for you to do it for them. And this is a hard lesson to learn, especially as a people pleaser, especially as a perfectionist. You want people to be happy and you want to do a good job. But somewhere you are compromising your energy levels, your quality of work, and the relationships with your customers. So don't be afraid to say no to things that are not inside your contract. And remember that your client is entitled to ask. I mean, they can ask any question. And most often, they don't necessarily expect you to do it. And you know this when you're like, sure, I'll do that for you. And it's hours worth of work, or days, or weeks, or months worth of work that you didn't expect to have to do. And they're like, okay, great, thanks. It's like, come again? Where's all the appreciation? Where's all the thank yous? Where's all the gratitude? I've said yes to doing something for you that's outside my scope of work. It almost feels like it was, like it's no big deal, even though it is. So what I want you to understand is that you can say no to requests that don't align with the scope of work you've been contracted to do. I guarantee you, when you go into the dentist to have a root canal or a filling, and you're like, hey, could you also clean my teeth? They're not like, yeah, sure. Oh my gosh. Like, we want to people please you. You asked, so we must deliver and not charge you for it. They'll say, yeah, sure. If you'd like to schedule in a teeth cleaning, that can be a separate appointment. Or if we have time, we can do it now. Just so you know, our teeth cleanings are X, Y, and Z. That's how much they cost. I don't know why it's so easy for other industries to just follow the status quo of that format. But for creatives and for wedding planners and wedding pros, it's so hard for us. It's so challenging for us. So take a page out of your dentist book, girl. You can say, sure, we can do that for you. We can schedule an appointment, and here's how we can add that to your invoice or to your contracts of service. The next and final way that you can eliminate or reduce scope creep in your wedding planning business is to have a solid planning process from the get-go. If you have a solid process and you understand what your planning process is from start to finish, no matter the level of service you've been booked, scope creep becomes very hard because you understand what your process is like and you guide your client through that process. And should outside things or requests come in, you're able to recognize that it's outside your scope of work and you can proceed accordingly, whatever that looks like. Having a solid planning process is pretty much the most critical thing you can have in a planning business. It's what you, as a planner, this is like number one. You need this. Before you need fancy templates and pricing guides, and before you need fancy softwares and all this other stuff, which you need to have a solid planning process. If you don't have one, you can steal mine. I will link to it in the description box below. I have 2 planning process playbooks in my shop. The first is full service. It walks you through how to map out a full planning process for your full service clients, including design and what the planning process, the budget process, all of that. And then I also have one for month of coordination. So if you're doing a lot of event management, month of coordination, or week of coordination, this is an entire planning process starting 16 weeks out from the wedding date, because that's really when our work begins. And it guides you in what your planning process should be up until after the wedding, really your offboarding process. I'll link to those in the description box below, and you can go and grab them in my shop. It's my planning process for my business that I'm giving to you. So if you need a planning process, go and steal mine. But this is something that is absolutely critical to eliminate or reduce scope creep, is to make sure you have a solid planning process that not only you understand, but also your clients understand. And I have to say, this might be an unpopular opinion, but if you aren't educating your couples on your signature planning process, it's because you don't have one. It's that simple. It's really that simple. So with that said, I'll link to my planning process in the description box below. Now, Let's talk about scope creep from the perspective of the services that you offer. There's one service that I think you should never offer, and you should actually strike it completely from your service offerings, and it's partial planning. I think partial planning is the mother lode of scope creep. Maybe we should record a separate video all on why I think partial wedding planning is one of the worst services that you can offer, and it's a disservice to your customers and not only your business. Comment in the description box below. Let me know your thoughts on that if you'd like to hear me speak more about why I loathe partial planning, and I really, really dislike partial planning. All right, so let's recap and sum up how you can avoid and reduce scope creep as a wedding planner. Managing scope creep in the wedding industry as a planner is key, and it's just one of those situations that you constantly have to keep an eye on. The first thing that I want you to do is make sure that you have clear boundaries and expectations with your client. This is so important. Also, make sure that you are communicating these boundaries effectively with your customers and that you are working on your communication skills, improving them where you feel like you lack. I want you to have a very detailed contract. Remember, a contract isn't just for you, it's also for your customer, and it protects both of you and also just sets the ground rules for your relationship going forward, making sure everybody's on the same page and understands. Don't be afraid to say no to things that are outside your contract. Remember, your client is entitled to ask, they're just not entitled to get what they ask for. And finally, you need to have a solid planning process in place in order to understand when scope creep is happening. Remember, scope creep is death by 1,000 paper cuts. It's little requests. Can you do this? Can you call this person? Can you send this email? Can you research? Can we do this over? And before you know it, with 20 clients, it has become so overwhelming. And you have to ask yourself, how did I get in this position? You didn't have a solid planning process in place, number one. And if you want to steal mine, I've linked it in the description box below. Okay, friend, listen, I've linked to a video here that I think that you should watch next. Let me know what type of video you'd like to see next from me. And if you'd like to hear me talk more about the planning process, scope creep, partial planning, and why I cannot stand it in the comment section below. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.